welcome back, and always an honor when we have a chance to sit down with our congressman. Representative Cliff Bentz is in the area today, and he's given us a few moments to be on the program this morning. Good to see you, Congressman. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Gosh, I don't know when you're sleeping. Maybe on an airplane. And that's not good sleep.
No, it's not.
That's good sleep. Thanks for a few moments. All right, you've been in the Congress when it was run by the Biden administration. Now you've been in Congress for a couple of months, being run by the Trump administration. How do you feel?
Well, to quote, I think it was from one of the Republican magazines, America's long 2-year nap is over. Yeah. And in the last 60 days, we've seen some astounding things, and it's a welcome change. Your
side of the aisle has gotten some legislation through, and you've got some CRs through that normally was a real battle. In fact, it cost some speakers their position in the past. But you've been able to slip a couple of through here. I don't know what the process was behind the scenes, but one of the net results of not only passing the CR is that you were able to put Chuck Schumer in a box. Did you see it going in?
Well, I think we all saw it. We all saw it, believe it or not. We saw it, to your point, when Kevin McCarthy put almost an identical thing together, and 21 of we Republicans, I didn't, but 21 other of my Republican colleagues voted against it. And that was a year and a half ago. Yeah. And that was so sad because we had the same thing set up. And yet 21 of us, for whatever reason, it was very sad. And the next day, the clean CR passed, and then the following week, McCarthy was removed. That was sad. Mike Johnson has stepped in and done a really fine job, and he got up in front of us and he said, as he's done many times, we can put the Senate Democrats in a box if we just get this CR out the door. And we did, but it took President Trump calling and twisting arms on a number of my colleagues. I'm going to say 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. And to my colleagues' credit, they listened and they came around, and we voted all but one for the CR, and thus the Democrats in total disarray, voting to close down the government, not pay our military, put people's benefits at risk. I mean, it's an amazing thing to watch.
Their standard argument for that has always been that, but this time the shoe was on their foot, and yes, they couldn't afford to have a shutdown under their watch.
Well, apparently all but 10 of them thought they could, including our 2 senators here in Oregon. Both voted for the shutdown, and they should have to answer to that.
They should. They should. All right, short time, got a lot going on. What do you think is going to happen with reviewing what's going on with Medicaid?
So I changed committees. I went from Judiciary over to Energy and Commerce, and I am on the Healthcare Subcommittee that's been charged with addressing how to save money in the energy and commerce space. And Medicaid is one of the several different locations that we'll be looking for some sort of savings. But we have to protect that program. It's essential. It's important. There are people who absolutely are dependent upon it, whether they're in nursing homes or whether they're pregnant. I mean, this is an important program. And people need to understand that. To quote the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Brett Guthrie, we will never spend less than we're spending a day on Medicaid. Mm-hmm. So looking forward, what we'll be looking at is how do we go into that program and operate to make it work better, while at the same time trying to make it perhaps not grow as fast. And to that end, I've reached out to former Governor Kitzhaber 2 months ago and asked for his thoughts, because he did the same thing here in Oregon 12 years ago. He reformed it. Yeah. And that's exactly what we need to be doing. And Governor Kitzhaber's been a huge help.
That's good. I think that's where he shined.
That's exactly right, and he's been very good. He put together a work group for me, and he's been giving us some advice, and I've been sharing that with the committee.
DOGE is upsetting the world, as you well know. Probably the effects of DOGE is probably the biggest thing you're running into when you do town hall meetings. Yeah. People
are using DOGE's efforts to slim down government as an excuse to go crazy and exaggerate and scare people. If you go back 30 years ago and look at what Newt Gingrich did when he was able to balance the budget with the Republicans, notwithstanding Bill Clinton's well, as many people say, well, Bill Clinton was there at the time. I think Clinton tries to take credit for it, but it was Newt, Speaker Gingrich that got it done, and the budget was balanced. But if you listen to the Democrats back then, 30 years back, you would have heard them doing the same thing they're doing now, which is to try to use fear as scare tactics to make people think that all these programs are going to be hugely damaged or even pushed away. That is not true. And people should stop using those tactics. All they do is scare people, and none of those assertions are correct.
So, do you think, Congressman, we are literally heading towards a balanced budget?
Well, at least we're taking the first initial steps, which we're spending $2 trillion a year more than is coming through the door. $2 trillion more. We spend $6, roughly a little more. We spend, or we have $4 or a little more coming through the door. We're going in the hole $2 trillion a year, stacked on top of $36 trillion of existing debt. We have to do something differently. We have to. And while at the same time maintaining our economy. That's why extending the Trump tax cuts is so important, because you got to keep your economy going. And if we were to allow those tax cuts to expire, we would see a loss of 6 million jobs. We would see economic devastation, if you will. It would be bad news for our economy if we don't extend those tax cuts. So we've got to do both. Somehow spend less, and at the same time make sure we don't damage the economy.
Okay, you were formerly on the Judiciary Committee, but just from that experience, there is the talk of maybe impeaching judges. Now, I understand it's talk. I find it interesting that two Supreme Court justices have spoke out, said that's not a good thing, which kind of puts them in play. I don't know why they would do that, but they did. But the judge that is particular causing all the trouble, comes to find out, he's the judge that worked with FISA, got back to where the Russia collusion. He's obviously an activist judge. Is the appetite in Congress, especially at the Judiciary Committee, to consider impeachment?
Well, I was on the committee until January, and I went over to E&C, so I have a pretty good idea of what the committee is going to think about doing, although it'll be up to Jim Jordan, a good friend of mine, to decide. He's chair. I think he knows that he could not get an impeachment set of impeachment articles across the floor of the House. And so what I'm going to guess will probably happen if those articles are voted upon, and I think 4 sets of articles have been filed against 4 separate judges. What will probably happen is what we've seen in the past, and that would be referred to the Judiciary Committee. And then Jim would be the one that would deal with it. I think Jim knows that there are other approaches, one of which is Darrell Iss's, who's a congressman, Republican from Southern California, has a bill that would narrow the scope of an injunction that a judge could issue. And this is not a new bill. We've talked about it before, and I think that's what we'll see come onto the floor. I'm
glad to hear you say that, because it seems to me that legislation would be the safest way to go instead of impeachment, only because impeachments fail would be refueling the Democrats.
Well, there's that, and then there's the fact that it's not going to pass, because it takes 2/3 of the Senate.
Yeah.
So it is not going to pass. And so President Trump has made his point, and it's a good one, that these judges are interfering with the removal of very, very dangerous people that should be removed. He is trying to protect the country by taking these steps. But as has been pointed out, the proper approach, I think, is just what we are doing in Congress, and that is to narrow the authority of judges down to a space, as opposed to lower court judges down to a smaller space in the entire United States.
So, as a lawyer, are you surprised that a lower court had the authority to jump over and stop the President of the United States from doing something?
No, that's the way the law is, and so the challenge is how do we change it?
Okay. All right. So you're up and running. What's your goal this term? What do you want to do?
Well, I want to be part of a team that gets our reconciliation bill passed, because that reconciliation bill is probably the most important thing we can do to keep our economy humming along, and it is also going to contain things that actually move us in the proper direction. There is nobody talks about the fact that suddenly the border is secure. Mm-hmm. The border is secure. Mm-hmm. There were 189,000 people that came across in February of last year. 189,000 people. This February, 8,000. 8,000. And that the savings, when you look at about $9,000 per person coming across, is what it's estimated that a new immigrant's going to cost the taxpayer. That's like $1.6 billion saved in 1 month, just stopping that kind of thing. But in order to continue that type of protection, we need to invest serious money in the border, and that's in the reconciliation bill.
Okay. One of the controversies, as you well know, is this wildfire map being propagated over the state of Oregon. A lot of pushback on that. How does that move into federal, jurisdiction or concern?
Well, it's a huge concern because it's driving insurance rates through the roof, and it's exactly the wrong tool to try to address a really, really serious problem. Where it comes into play is the fact that it is reflective. By the way, I want the map gone. I want the law that should never have been passed.
Excuse me real quick. Do you think that is a possibility? It looks like the governor has leaned towards maybe not going with that bill because of the pushback, or at least pausing it. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think it is a possibility.
Good. Okay. Because that's a response from people showing up at these town halls and pushing back.
As they should. Yeah. But what we really should be screaming about is the crazy way that we allow big, huge corporations to donate money to these groups that then file lawsuits. They prevent us from getting into the woods and driving down the risk of fire, because that's the way you drive down insurance rates. And so we have to. And to that end, we have the Fix Our Forest Act, which I've supported for years, and we think we might get it passed. It might be a portion of it, at least, in the reconciliation bill. And that would be huge. Then we can get in and drive down risk.
I'm going a little bit of a statement to set up the question. As you know, Missouri was able to sue China over the effects of COVID and the vaccine. Very successful. $24 billion, they won the suit. Without China being in the courtroom, representing itself, and having anything to say, and have no intentions to pay the $24 billion. But that does leave the state with the capability of taking over their assets in the state, primarily farmland. They can take the farmland back. I asked that because I know a big part of your district is agriculture. I have family down in the Central Valley, and they're looking at this as a way to get China out of the ag business. What do you think?
Well, I hadn't heard about the case. It's certainly an approach that would work. I have to share with this. I went to a farm auction with my brother. We live on the border near Idaho. We went into Idaho to this auction. It's a small auction yard. There were a dozen containers, great big huge shipping containers there, all from China. And they were for sale, the containers, but the contents were all lined up to be sold. All pieces of equipment, brand new, from China,
at the auction,
in little Idaho. My brother, who goes to many of these, says that this is happening at every auction. Every auction has these containers that are shipped from China, unloaded, line up all the equipment, all kinds of little types of post hole diggers and little rock crushers and things like that. And then the brand new, and it's the kind of stuff that might last a week. I'm not sure how long it'll last. But the point is, this is how China takes over a space.
Yeah.
This is how they do it. And all of a sudden, every auction has this stuff. And so you can go online and check because they're online.
I get it.
I'm just saying we need to be doing something about these.
Well, I think this case, you might want to look into it, because the only way they can collect on the $24 billion is to confiscate the China assets in the state, and a lot of it was ag. And if we can kick China out of the ag business, and there's the window to do it, we ought to be filing on the back of that suit, especially California ought to be filing on the back of that suit, because it was won hands down.
Well, we'll check into it.
Yeah. It's a good deal. I mean, quickly, what are the biggest concerns out east in Oregon? What are you hearing from your constituents?
Well, I think a lot of people are sadly, listening to some of these town halls and getting really scared. And we need to remember, it's not our job to scare people, it's to protect them. And I think what people need to understand is that we're doing our best to address a hugely serious issue this country has, way too much debt, and that in that fashion we'll be able to protect these programs. But they're very concerned. Thanks
for coming in. I know you're on a tight schedule. You're always welcome when you're in town. Let us know. Thanks for what you're doing. You look a little happier these days.
As well. It's great being in the majority, I'll tell you that.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Okay, we'll be right back.